very warm welcome to everyone. It is my distinct honor to introduce a luminary whose words not only captivate the mind but also still the soul. In the words of the renowned author Maya Angelou, there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. Our esteemed author, Mrs. Sudhapa Basu, has not only embraced the power of storytelling, but has mastered the art, weaving narratives that resonate with the depths of human experience. Mrs. Sudhapa Basu, renowned for her enchanting historical novels such as Padmavati, Dangal, The Curse of Nadir Shah, The Legend of Genghis Khan, Out of the View, and The Anatomy of Perfection. She has won the Best Fiction Award by Author Awards 2020 instituted by J.K. Papers and the Times of India. She is the 2016 first prize winner of the Times of India's Right India campaign for Amish Tripathi, while her debut novel Dangal was nominated for the Anupam Kher Award for Best Debut English Novel in 2007. Not only this, in 2021, she received an award for excellence in publishing by the Public Diplomacy Forum. Please join me in welcoming Mrs. Sudhapa Basu, whose literary prowess has not only earned her accolades but has left an indelible mark on the tapestry of literature. As we embark on this literary journey of unveiling Parvatibai, let the words of Mrs. Basu inspire us and transport us into the realms of imagination and wisdom. Without further ado, let us delve into the extraordinary world crafted by Mrs. Sudhapa Basu. For it, I am handing over the stage to Mrs. Charlie Sehgal to take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shamani. That was quite an impressive introduction to our renowned author indeed. Good morning to one and all. My name is Chandni Sehgal and I will be your host for this interesting book reading session, which is part of Author Awards, an initiative brought to you by J.K. Paper and Times of India. Author Awards is a platform to encourage women authors to express their creativity and fondness for writing. It is a celebration of the art of storytelling by women writers. This initiative wishes to acknowledge exemplary pieces of writings by women authors to inspire and motivate more women to take up writing, pen that story and feel proud of their accomplishments. On 29th of October this year, we launched Season 5 of Author Awards. Over the last 4+ years, we have seen more than 5,500 entries in various categories from across the country, and more than 70 eminent personalities have gotten associated with the awards journey. As part of the initiative to celebrate the writing of women authors, we have executed many immersive multi-city and virtual book reading sessions, and today we bring you Sudhapa Basu for the lady here, one of the best-selling award-winning authors as well as an educationist, poet, storyteller and a translator as well. Her historical novel The Curse of Nadir Shah won the Best Fiction Award by the Author Awards 2020 instituted by J.K. Papers and the Times of India. She is 2016 first prize winner of Times of India Right India campaign for Amish Tripathi, while her debut, a psychological thriller, Dangal, was nominated for Anupam Kher Award for the Best Debut English Novel in 2017. In March of 2021, she received an award for excellence in publishing by the Public Diplomacy Forum, and she's also a well-known best-selling historical fiction. Padmavati, the Queen, tells her own story in 2017. Her second historical fiction initiated the Invader series with the Legends of Genghis Khan 2018 and continued with The Curse of Nadir Shah 2019. She is also the director of publishing at UFIS Learning. There is so much more to her work, her written work, that we would need a much longer session with her indeed. But it is truly an honor to welcome a person of such vibrant caliber and personality who has been motivating the youth all across. Can we have a round of applause for the lady? And let's welcome Miss Basu here today. I'm going to start this book reading session now, and I would be requesting the humble presence of our author to kindly join me here on stage. Well, the magic begins now, and I would request all the wonderful students to gear up, give us your 100% attention here for this spectacular session with Ms. Basu here with us. So, I'm going to start with a very basic question. I believe that a person's interest has a lot to do with a person's learning. So, this is really a twofold question. First, have you always been interested in writing? Was that your go-to thing? And secondly, when did you realize that this is what you want to pursue professionally?
Thank you so much, and it's lovely to be here. And I would like to first thank Auther Awards for creating and arranging this session, and then, of course, the principal, the faculty of the Army Public School, and the dear students. I'm so happy to be here with all of you. To answer your question, I have always been a voracious reader. So even as a child, I would, consume one book a day kind of thing. And of course, I had my favorite authors. And then slowly, as I read them, a dream started inside me. What if I could write like those authors? And people like me, as I was reading, they would read my stories, hear my voice. And then that dream kept growing. I kept writing, but I was never confident of getting it published. Then it was only in 2014 that I thought that I have to take the leap. I have to see whether my book, stories can be published. And so I was already working at a very high position in a corporate, in a publishing house, and I decided to leave the job, take a sabbatical, and sit down to write. I had lots of doubts. I was struggling because I was wondering whether I could write well, whether anybody would ever publish what I write, and will anybody ever buy and read what I'm writing. And then came a beautiful contest called Write India Contest by the Times of India. I submitted my story, my entry, and to my greatest surprise, it won the first prize. And that gave me the boost, that gave me the confidence and the platform and encouraged me to keep writing. I completed my first book, which was a psychological thriller called Angle. And then it went on to win the best debut book by Anupam Kher Book Awards. That again gave me a lot of encouragement, and I kept writing. And then, of course, The Curse of Nadir Shah was awarded the best fiction book by Auther Awards. And then there was no stopping. The journey continues.
Wow, that is quite an inspirational journey indeed, I must say that. It makes me wonder, you started with fiction and then you slowly and gradually shifted towards historical fiction.
Yes.
What was the thing about historical incidences that really attracted you towards them, towards finding out what was within and how to, proclaim it and share it forward with the world through your perspective, through your stories?
So I'm of course a student of English literature, both
Okay.
for graduation and post-graduation, but I was always interested in history. When my favorite genre when I read is historical fiction. I read, Indu Sundaresan or Philippa Gregory. They are my favorite authors. And I realized that history that in school we find so dry, so drab, and so boring. Uh, you have to all the time think of all the dates you have to remember, all those names that you have to remember, and all those events, battles, and events. But history is really not like that. History can be an adventure if you really delve deep into it. Because history, as we think that history is about dead people and history is dead, it's not. It's alive and it's living all around us. If we want to understand anything that is happening in the present times, we need to know what caused it. Why is it happening? And then we go back to history. So actually, history is the link between the past and the present. To understand present, we need to go to history and the past. And that is what made me feel that I should write what I read so much. And that is how I started writing. My first historical novel was Padmavati. The Queen tells her own story, which was published in 2017, I think, and it's still a very popular book. Lots of people want to read it, and that started a kind of series which was about heroic women of India who wanted to create and change history. So the next book in that series is Parvatibai, which is this book. Again, it's about a heroic woman who wanted to change history. And then I went on to write about the invaders who came to India. So the first book was The Legend of Genghis Khan, who came to India, who invaded India, and then The Curse of Nadir Shah, which won the Best Fiction Award. And I have to still write the third one. Similarly, I have to write the third one in The Heroic Woman as well.
Well, we all are really eagerly waiting for that one for sure. But let's focus on the book we have in hand right now. Parvatibai, the forgotten witness of the Battle of Panipat. So you are definitely sharing through her eyes and her vision how the third battle of Panipat happened. The book challenges many historical interpretations.
Right.
Would you like to elaborate a little on that with us?
So obviously, when I decided to write this book, I had to do a huge amount of research, which I always do for all my historical books, because without research, how can you possibly write about history? When I started doing my research, there are many interpretations about the causes of the defeat of the Marathas at the Third Battle of Panipat. But I found something very strange. I found out that Parvati Bai, who was the wife of the supreme commander of the Maratha forces, Sadashivrao Bhau, had accompanied her husband all the way from Pune to Panipat. And then, nearly 9 months, the entire army and a lot of pilgrims who had gone with them were under siege by the Afghan invader whom they had come to fight. During that siege, where there was so much shortage of food and so much shortage of water and even weapons, Parvati Bai managed the entire scene. She managed to get food for everybody. At the same time, Parvati Bai herself was a warrior, and she was quite aware of battle strategies, and she would advise her husband as well as the other sardars. Even during the battle, she observed the entire battle, and she was one of the few survivors of the battle. Yet, nowhere in the recorded history that I read was there an account by Parvati Bai. Nobody asked her, though she was a witness of the entire enterprise, the entire campaign. And that made me curious. I thought, why is this so? Is it that somebody wanted to suppress her voice? And then I found some hints where they said that maybe she was a spy for the Afghans, which is very difficult to believe. And then I read more and more lesser known books about the Battle of Panipat and got to know so much more. And that is why I started writing Parvati Bai, because I wanted to let readers, young people like you, know the truth about the Battle of Panipat and about heroic women like Parvati Bai.
I can sense that you put in a lot of effort in your time and energy to researching the right facts. The books which are not that easily available in the market also. So how long overall it took you to get into this in-depth research about the battles? And there have been certain questions that have to be addressed about Marathas' defeat, subsequent successes, even some of the lesser known accounts.
Mhm.
Got hold of it through those books. But how did you get into the research part? Like, how long and how much of effort on your part was required for the research for this particular book?
So, not just for this book, for all my historical books, I at least spent 2 to 3 months researching, and similarly for this book. But other than that basic or primary research, even when I'm writing, I go back to my sources to find out many things about that historical period, the era, or the protagonist. So I will find out about the food they ate, the kind of dress they wore, what kind of language they spoke, what were the customs, what were the traditions that were there in that era. And the reason I do that is I want to draw my reader into that historical period. I want them to feel the history that is happening during that time and become a part of the story. So that is the reason I do this, to create the surroundings, to create the environment. So I always do that. Now, the sources are, of course, books, archival material. I'll go to libraries and I will, research there. I also watch a lot of documentaries, a lot of videos. I read blogs, and most important, I try to visit the place where that event took place. So I went to Panipat. I went to the battleground where actually the battle had taken place. And nearly 1 lakh people were massacred over there in that place. Right now, it is a garden and it's a park called Kala Amb Park. And there's a story behind why it's called the Kala Amb Park. So there was a mango tree which grew there. After the battle, all the mangoes that grew on that tree had become black, possibly because of the blood that had seeped into the ground and into the roots on that tree. After some time, obviously the tree fell down, it broke. But the people in those villages around, they have cut pieces of that wood and they have kept it in their houses. So that is the story of the Kala Amb. And that's why it's called the Kala Amb Park. And when I was walking, through that park, and I was trying to imagine the number of people who had died there, it was a very peaceful park, but there was some kind of eeriness. I actually felt as though people were whispering to me and they had not left the place. They were still there. And that feeling, I try to put into my stories. I try to put it into my writing so that it reaches the readers.
I can completely relate it to the way you shared your research material here with us, and there were certain instances, there are certain stories about certain things, and when you visit a place, you're able to feel the pain, you're able to feel the negative vibe that the place proclaims, for sure. The Marathas were defeated, and as you said, there were rumors that Parvatibai might be a spy. If not her, there might have been a spy.
True.
How else will the Afghans know how to attack, at which forefront to attack? So, without giving out too many details, because I would want our students to read the book, can you tell us a bit about why is that the Marathas were defeated?
So there are, of course, many interpretations of what were the causes of the Maratha defeat, because it was a very significant battle. The Marathas were very well equipped. They had excellent guns. They had cannon. Their soldiers were very brave, and they had nearly 1 lakh soldiers. So it was not numbers which was the problem. Not only that, they were led by Sadashiv Rao Bhau, who was a veteran of many campaigns. In fact, the fact that the Maratha kingdom had empire had extended so much was due to Sadashiv Rao Bhau. Now, let me come to the reasons. First and foremost, the Maratha Empire in the 17th century was from Gujarat to West Bengal, from Karnataka to Attock. Do you know where is Attock? Attock is near Afghanistan, in Afghanistan. So that was the extent of the Maratha Empire in the mid 17th century. So when the Marathas put their flag in Attock, the person who started feeling very, very insecure and threatened was the Afghan ruler, Ahmad Shah Abdali. So he definitely did not want the Marathas right on his doorstep. But you will not believe this, but it were the Indians, people who lived in India, who invited Abdali to invade India. Now, why did that happen? Firstly, the Mughal kingdom was declining. It was already in tatters, and there was a power vacuum on the top. Everybody wanted to fill that power vacuum. The Rohillas, the chief of the Rohilla, Najibullah Khan, he wanted to actually take that power, seize that power. But the Mughal throne was being protected by the Marathas. So he invited Abdali to fight the Marathas. North India was full of small kingdoms which were by the Rajput rulers as well as by the Jat rulers. They were being dominated by the Marathas and they did not like it. So they also wanted that Abdali should come and fight the Marathas. So Indians were helping Abdali, an invader, a foreign invader, to come into India to loot and plunder and kill Indians. In fact, the Nawab of Audh, who was a very powerful king also joined Abdali. On the other hand, the Marathas were being helped by nobody. None of the rulers were helping them in the north of India. Even the people in the villages were not helping them. And there was a reason for that. So, if you look at history, whenever a ruler would conquer a region, he would establish his kingdom there and he would start looking after the people there. He would rule them, basically, administer them. Marathas never did that. Marathas would conquer areas. They would tell the kings, you can rule, but you have to give us tribute. So you are coming under us. And that people did not like. They did not want a landlord. That is what Marathas became. And that is the reason people were not anymore loyal to the Marathas. So that was again a political reason for that. Now let's come to the Battle of Panipat. Yes, of course, since so many Indians were helping the Afghans, obviously there could be spies in the Maratha camp. Who were those spies was something that you will find out if you read the book. Along with that, the Maratha Sardars, who are also a part of the Maratha army and who had been living in North India for a very long time because they had to look after all the territories that the Marathas had taken, those people had started filling their own personal coffers with wealth. They built their own houses, they would get all the tribute that they were getting from the rulers, they would keep some of it. And the rulers would help them. So there was a kind of nexus between these Maratha Sardars and the people and the rulers, the local rulers. And they were afraid, the Maratha Sardars, that if Sadashivrao Bhau found out, Sadashivrao Bhau was the cousin of the Peshwa, who was very powerful. He would go and complain to them. And they would lose their jobs and they would be recalled. So it wasn't their, it was an advantage to them if Sadashiv Rao was not successful. As a result, when the battle was going on, the Marathas were winning the battle at the beginning. But the Maratha Sardars, some of them, left the battleground. And that was the real reason why the Maratha army finally lost the battle. And Parvatibai was one of those few survivors because Sadashiv Rao did not survive the battle. He died. But she was a survivor and she saw it all. And yet nobody asked her what are the causes of the battle, of the defeat at the Battle of Panipat.
A lot of students here are actually wanting right now to just open up the book and start reading. I am for one, because of the way you explained the theories, the reasons, and the final fallout of Marathas. That was quite interesting indeed. I would like to understand, because it's historical fiction, did you ever ponder that maybe the book would only cater to a certain kind of selected audience who are into, historical facts and fictions?
No, that is absolutely possible. Obviously, people who love history would love to read a book like this. But I believe that this book is something that all Indians and definitely children must read. Because you see, what has happened is most of our history books today, especially the ones we read in school, have been based on the content of historians who are Western, who would interpret history according to the loyalties of their communities. It is time that Indians wrote Indian history for Indians so that we can know the real truth behind the events. And like I said, also about these heroic men and women who actually created history, who actually changed history, who made India what India is today.
Wow.
Thank you.
In one word, that really makes us feel that yes, our Indian heritage, our culture is so diverse, and the history behind those cultures and traditions are something we need to learn and get to know ourselves, our heritage, and move forward. I would also like to now request you to read any of your favorite stanzas from the book here that you relate to the most.
Okay.
Yeah.
So before I just read this part, which is about Parvatibai, let me tell you a little bit about her. Of course, you'll know more when you read the book. Parvatibai came from a very humble and a poor family. And she was only 10 years old when she was married to Sadashiv Rao Bhau, who was, as I said, the cousin of the Peshwa. And the Peshwa was very powerful, very rich, very wealthy, and very powerful in the Maratha empire. She was only 10 years old when she came to Shanivar Wada, which is the palace where the Peshwa lived. And when she came in, she realized that she would have to navigate the politics that were inside that palace, especially from Gopika Bai, who was the Peshwa's wife. She did not like Parvati Bai at all, and she would harass her all the time. But even as a child, she learned how to manage that. And she also learned to educate herself, though education was not allowed to girls at that time. And she learned how to fight with weapons. So this is how she became the person that she was. And when Sadashiv Rao Bhau was told by the Peshwa to lead the Maratha army to Panipat to defeat Ahmad Shah Abdali, she requested him to let her go as the Munim, which means that she would manage the stores, the ammunition, care of the animals, care of the people, the food, everything for the army. And she told her husband, you can completely focus on the strategy and the battles. I will look after the entire army. So that is how she accompanied her husband. And this is something that she wonders as she's sitting there. What an experience this journey has been. Her mind went back over the last 7 months. Cloistered inside Shanivar Vada, how naive I was, she mused. Now I know that victory in war depends not just on well trained troops, but also on guarding against sedition. Let Raya plan his strategies with guns. My endeavor is to crush all traitors who impede his expedition. If the enemy is slithering among us, I will break its neck. Wisdom is reaped when least expected. When the journey began, I believed I would only be an observer, watch the river of life flow by. Little did I know that I will want to swim midstream in it all the while struggling against its hidden currents. But I would not have it any other way. Accompanying Raya to this expedition was my best decision.
We can make out that the lady here was too ahead of her time. She educated herself, she became self reliant, she was independent, and she took care of the people, of the livestock at such a young age.
Yes.
She knew her responsibilities and she was there off the battlefield fighting against the occults. So I would like to ask you this. The women in that time period were not given too much of freedom. We all know there were many things that men wanted to take control of the entire household.
Absolutely.
So at that time, while she was helping her husband and trying to help him win the war, do you think the kind of support she was delivering to her husband at the time the same kind of support she was receiving from the people, from the family members to, help them forward?
Not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all. In fact, like I said, Gopika Bai was always afraid that her sons will have competition from the children of Sadashivrao Bhau and Parvatibai. Now it's tragic, but the fact is that Parvatibai and Sadashivrao Bhau never had any children. Instead, the first son of Gopika Bai was adopted by them, and the reason was that Gopika Bai was very ill when the child was born. So from the first day, it was Parvati Bai who looked after that child, Vishwasrao, and he was the designate Peshwa. So when Sadashiv Rao and Parvati Bai decided to go, they went to Panipat, Gopika Bai made sure that Vishwasrao went with them. He was only, say, 13 or 14 years old, and he went with them. And she, of course, said that, I know that Sadashiv Rao and Parvati Bai are going, so he'll be looked after. Nothing will happen to him. But the real reason was that she was afraid that if Sadashiv Rao Bhau won the battle, he would claim the throne, the Mughal throne, for himself, which Sadashiv Rao never had any intention of. So she made sure that the credit of the battle, of winning the battle, will go to her son, Vishwasrao. But what a tragedy. She sent that little boy, 13 or 14-year-old, into the battle, and he died there. He was killed at that battle. And when Parvati Bai came back to Shaniwarwada, Gopika Bai blamed her. She said, because of you, Vishwasrao died. But that was not the truth. And Parvati Bai stood up and told her that. She said that it was you who sent him. So you are actually responsible for the death. So, and later on, Gopika Bai is the one, possibly with the other Maratha Sardars who had come back from the battle, who knew that they were traitors, who may have spread those rumors that Sadashiv Rao Bhau was a bad commander and Parvati Bai may have been a spy, which was not at all the truth. But it's very human to hide your own weaknesses by attacking somebody else.
There was a lot of politics going on inside the
Absolutely.
palace and outside the palace as well. So we know that there have been 3 battles of Panipat. But how come the first 2 battles are not that famous for that matter? How come the 3rd battle of Panipat is the one most talked about? What is the reason for that, as per you?
So the 3rd battle of Panipat was a turning point in India's history. If the Marathas were not defeated, if they had won the battle, it's quite possible that after the Mughal Empire, there would have been a Maratha Empire in India. It would have been ruled by a Hindu king, because that was the dream of Shivaji. He wanted a Hindu Samrajya in India. Unfortunately, because of the defeat at Panipat, and of course, Abdali went back. It is not that Abdali remained in India. He went back. But it weakened the Marathas and gave a foothold to the British. And that is the reason, possibly, that the British ruled over India for the next 300 years. That is the reason the Battle of Panipat, the 3rd Battle of Panipat, is so significant. Because it is a watershed. It is a turning point in the history of India.
Could you read a small stanza related to the battle from your book and tell us more about it? I'm sure a lot of students would like to hear that.
Yeah. Sadashiv Rao Bhau, along with Vishwas Rao, led the elite Hazurat in a rousing cavalry charge. This is the beginning of the battle. They directly confronted the Afghan contingent under Vizier Shah Wali Khan. Bhau's offensive was so pugnacious that the Hazurat was upon the enemy before the Vizier's army had any time to respond. Loading and firing repeatedly, swords flashing like lightning, the elite cavalry advanced like a tempest. Afghans were pushed back incessantly, stride by stride. General Atai Khan, who had slaughtered Govind Pant, was killed in a combat. Under the stunning assault by the Marathas, the center of the Abdali's crescent collapsed. Lashkars threw down their weapons and began to run away. Bhao's troops wiped out about 10,000 Afghan horsemen, 7,000 Persian musketeers, and 1,000 camels carrying zamburaks in their attack. Within hardly an hour of the battle commencing, the Afghan Dastagi in central and right wings of the crescent were in complete confusion. When this news reached Ahmad Shah Abdali, he was desperate. His mighty army was on the verge of a defeat. He had larger numbers, but his soldiers and war animals were stronger and had more stamina. Yet they were being decimated. The Maratha army too suffered a setback when their cavalry could not dominate the leverage furnished by Khan's artillery. However, the sheer fury of the extensive hand-to-hand conflict inflicted by the Hazurat and Vishwasrau's Khas Pag threw the Afghan forces into utter chaos. Besides, Afghan arrogance had not anticipated this terrible bloodbath so early in the battle. With a daring, headlong charge, Bhao's forces had sliced through the enemy's ranks, routed them, and put them to total flight. The Grand Vizier made desperate efforts to hold his position in the crescent with a small body of loyal troops. But Bhao's vast legions of nearly 13,500 men heaved up like a turbulent ocean and swept down without resistance, flowing nearly to the perimeter of Abdali's personal tent. Nawab Shuja'uddullah, that is the king of Oudh, positioned on the left of the Vizier, observed this chaotic retreat of the Vizier's Lashkars and cavalry. Concerned, he sent his minister Kashiraj Pandit to find out Shah Wali Khan's condition. Pandit found the Vizier sitting on the ground, furrowed by fleeing hoofs. In rage and despair, he was flinging mud into his mouth and cursing the soldiers who were streaming past him. He was yelling to them, "Whither do you flee? Our country is far off, my friends. Stay back and fight like men." But nobody heeded his shouts.
It's very hard to write the violence that could be sensed and seen or imagined in a battlefield ground. How people are dying left, right, and center. There's bloodshed, there's gore, and everybody there on the battlefield is fighting for their ruler
Right.
and not for self. So it takes quite an effort. I used to think in that time period that people will go selflessly to the battlefield and just believe in the leader they stand for and fight with all their might at the danger of losing their lives. So writing all of these battlefield scenes, I'm sure it might have taken a bit of toll on you mentally also. So how long did it take you to, finish your work with this book? Taking into account that there are so many diverse zones you need to cover, not just the politics in the palace, but also the bloodshed on the battlefield that has to be described. How long did you take to finish this?
So it took me at least 6 months, 6 to 7 months. But I wrote this book mostly during the COVID lockdown. So to a great extent, because I was doing so much work and so much research, it absorbed my mind, and I could, shut out the terrible things that were happening outside my house.
So during the COVID time, you had a small place to yourself to take your mind
Absolutely, yeah.
and get engrossed completely into it
Hmm.
and give it your best. Any of your favorite parts in this book that brings a smile to your face while you were writing them? Any of those memories you would like to share with us?
Absolutely. In fact, I think I'll read out to you what
Yes.
is my favorite part. Again, it's about Parvatibai, but a very different picture of Parvatibai.
All right, please do share.
Yeah. Who is the new opponent? Gazing upwards, an extraordinary sight met their eyes. A war elephant was thundering towards them. kneeling in the howdah, was a warrior, pulling back the bowstring with an arrow notched. Slack-jawed, they gawked. Loose hair flew behind her like a dark cloud, stern eyes fixed on target, a glittering nut, green sari tightly bound. She was the veritable Ma Bhavani on the warpath. Another arrow whizzed, another man fell. Rohillas from the Maratha camp recognized her, exclaiming, Bhai Saab, Bhai Saab. It took a while for the Afghans to recover from their shock. Then some of them charged at the woman while the rest rushed towards the elephant. Twang, twang, twang. Parvatibai's arrows picked each one of them and felled them. Twang! More soldiers replaced their fallen comrades. Twang! Moments later, the next man fell. Another arrow, another man tumbled on the grass. One more arrow, one more man. Tukaji had also picked up his bow. More fallen soldiers marked the path. It did not take long for the Lashkars to realize it would be better to fight the women than the skilled war goddess. Taking cover from Parvatibai's lethal arrows behind the bullock carts, they focused on fighting the swordswomen, slashing, plunging, thrusting with their blades. Meherbai and her companions killed a great number of enemy until they were surrounded and overwhelmed. Once the fence was obliterated, the Afghans and Rohillas fell on the unarmed pilgrims. They slayed, plundered, and ravaged the screaming victims. By then, Rajkumari had reached the carts. Parvatibai was shooting a barrage of arrows standing on a howdah. However, when children and women were being massacred, she started to climb down, her sword unsheathed to take the assailants. Tukaji shouted, Bhai Saab, look out! Few enemy soldiers had stealthily clambered up to the howdah. One was just behind Parvatibai. The fearless lady, half turned, shining blade in each hand, her sword flashed with a shout, Mara! Another Rohilla was about to cut off Tukaji's head when the Qatar dived into his belly. He dropped off the elephant like a stone. Other Lashkars who were climbing up to the howdah decided to slip away. So that was Parvatibai, the warrior. You can see this, what she's holding in her hand. It's got a double handle and this is called a Qatar, a very, very popular Maratha weapon.
That is really impressive indeed. And in those times when there was an impression that a woman needs to be protected, it is a man's world. If she's out there defending herself, using a qatar, learning self-defense techniques with the weaponry of the time, and let me tell you, those weapons were very heavy to lift. So hats off to the warrior that she was, and quite an inspiration for us today, in today's time, where lifting even a finger is too much to ask for.
I know.
But yes, this has been quite a journey with you for this book, and I'm sure all the students here would definitely be going home or rather to the library, picking out this book and start reading. So, moving away from the book, I would like to ask you something. Did you ever feel a writer's block in your career as one, where you thought, no, I'm trying to write something, it's just not coming the way I want it to be? How did you get yourself out of that zone?
It happens quite frequently, but I have set myself a routine that I will write every day. Even if I'm writing 100 words, I will definitely make sure I write every day. I give myself deadlines that I will finish one chapter in a day or something like that. But of course, there are days when no words come and I'm struggling to find the right words. What I do is I don't write anymore. Instead, I read, because reading is also very important for writing. So I read other authors, see how they have managed maybe this similar kind of circumstances or situations. And the other thing I do is research. So I use that time to research, to find out other things about the story that I'm writing. So I'm still connected to my story, still connected to the book that I'm writing. That's how I usually manage a writer's block.
Well, it's said when you wake up in the morning and hurting is so great, you don't want to wake up and face the world of fate. When everything in life goes wrong and nothing you do seems right, just try a little harder and soon you will see the light.
Absolutely. I totally agree.
All right then. Thank you so much, Ms. Basu. We would now like to take a few questions from our lovely audience sitting here. So, to our vibrant young minds here, if you have any questions, please raise your hand and Ms. Basu will address them. Yes, please.
Ma'am, if you want to summarize the story of Parvatibai, how would you summarize in one line?
So Parvatibai was a woman who believed history can be changed by human endeavor. And that is what she did.
Any other question from the audience? Come on, I need more hands. Yes, yes, please, both of you.
Ma'am, what themes does the novel explore?
So the themes are of heroism, of female independence, female equality, and of course the battle of Panipat. There are, other than the main plot that is there, which is about the battle, there are many subplots because India at that time was in a turmoil, and that is the picture that I like to present in this book. So those are the different themes.
Yes, please.
Ma'am, what is the tone of this novel?
I'm sorry, will you repeat? What is
Ma'am,
the?
what is the tone of this novel?
So the tone of this novel is, I would say, emancipation, female emancipation. If you want to do something and you have the will to do it, no one can stop you.
Ma'am, while writing a story of an important historical figure, what all points are to be there that should be kept in mind?
So one of the few points that you must keep in mind is that if this is a historical figure, what made that historical figure significant? Why is that historical figure important? For events which came before, at that time, and even after. So that is what makes a historical figure really important. Also, history may present many historical figures in a negative light, but there is always a cause and effect relationship in history. So there will always be a reason why that person did what that person did. So whether I wrote about Genghis Khan, who was known to be a bloodthirsty barbarian. Why did he become what he became? And at the same time, he was one of the greatest Mongolian rulers. The Mongolian Empire at its zenith was 1/5 of the world's land area. Can you imagine how big that was? He was much more important than people like Alexander the Great. And yet, people have always seen him in a negative light. But that's not true. And why is that not true is something you will need to find out if you read the legend of Genghis Khan.
Okay, any questions this side? Yes.
Good morning.
Ma'am, I want to ask, ma'am, recently, ma'am, there are many Bollywood films that portrays the ma'am, historical event, themes and characters. Ma'am, do you think it is fine to manipulate the historical events and details just to earn many profits?
Absolutely not. I totally am against it. And let me tell you, I will not make a comment on either Padmavat or Panipat because I don't think it's my place to do it. But how I approach a historical novel is, when I do my research, I create the linear, diagram of the historical event, of that historical era. But you have to remember that history depends on evidence. So if there is evidence, then the historians have written about it. But when there is no evidence, historians have not written about that part. So whenever you put it in a kind of a design, a linear design, you will find that there are gaps because those are the places where the historians could not find any evidence. I use those gaps to create my story. It's like, embroidery. Through the actual cloth, I will complete that entire story through those gaps. So the facts remain as they are. I never distort the facts. But the story also moves in those gaps as a kind of a parallel line with the historical event.
Anybody else would like to? Yeah, please.
Good morning.
Ma'am, as we have seen from this discussion that you have written extensively about historical texts. Now, my question to you is, as a writer, ma'am, how difficult it is to mingle history into literature and how you manage it?
First and foremost, if you ever study literature of any country, all literature is dependent on the history of those times, right? I'll give you a very quick example. I mean, all of you know about Shakespeare, but we have read Shakespeare's plays, but Shakespeare's plays were not meant to be read. They were meant to be staged. And why? Because at that time, that was the entertainment. So you have to if you're studying literature, you have to always go back to the historical era in which that literature was written, that particular literary piece was written. So history and literature are very intermingled. They are joined together. So it's not at all difficult to bring literature into history or history into literature.
What about my right side? Any more questions coming from here?
All the questions are being asked by girls. I'm sure there are boys, right? No? There are no boys here?
There's another hand that was raised. Yes, please. What is your question?
Ma'am, you have written beautifully about historical characters like Parvatibai or Parvatibai. Do you think that history has done justice to them and they are the actual unsung heroes?
I will call them unsung heroes, definitely, because as I said that there was very little that I could find when I researched about them. But I want to say something to you here. We often make the mistake of judging historical characters or historical events based on the standards of today's world, of the modern world, right? And if you look at it that way, then you might say that those people were not given the kind of platform that they should have been given. But you have to also understand that they were navigating very difficult circumstances. The atmosphere, the society was very patriarchal. They did not give women any importance. Women were supposed to be behind closed doors of a home. These are the women who came out. Not only came out, they took their future, their destiny in their hands, which was very difficult for them to do. So I would say that these women were really heroic.
I think we will close the Q&A segment now. Just any one last question from boys? The backbenchers. Okay, so we have one final closing question coming.
So, ma'am, what is your opinion on the medieval history which is taught in start schools?
In your schools?
Yes, ma'am.
So medieval history is the history which is generally the Delhi Sultanate and the Mughals. That is your medieval history right now. I believe it should be taught exactly as it was being taught. There is nothing from it that should be deleted. They are all a part of India's history. Today, the India we live in, the culture that we are following is a culture that was brought by different people into India. And all those cultures are important. They make India what India is today. There is no country in the world which is so diverse as India. And there is no country in the world which is so united in its diversity. How did that diversity come? It came from all these from the invaders who had come, from the people who came, lived in this country. So I believe the entire medieval period is very important, very significant part of the history of India and should remain as it is. Nothing of it should be obliterated.
Well, thank you so much, and this brings us to the closure of our Q&A segment. Before we close this session, ma'am, I would request you to please share a few words of encouragement for the students, young writers, who are budding and who are still, a bit scared to take the big leap. What will be your words of encouragement to them?
Take the big leap. Don't think about writing, actually write. The greatest enemy of writing is I will do it tomorrow. Don't leave anything for tomorrow, do it today. The other thing is that never think writing is a hobby. Writing is not a hobby. It's serious work and very hard work to make a success of. So you must take your writing seriously. If you don't take it seriously, nobody else, your parents, your friends, no one will take it seriously, and definitely not the publisher to whom you will be giving your manuscript. So be very serious about your writing. Be disciplined about your writing. Read a lot when you write. And that does not mean that you should copy another writer's style or voice. No, develop your own style or voice, but read other writers to find out how they wrote. And one final thing, if you're really struggling with writing, I have something which is called Shutapa Studio, which conducts mentorship programs in creative writing. So I conduct short workshops, which I come to schools and do. And I also conduct a long course of 10 weeks, of 10 classes. And during that course, the stories that are written can be published if the writers want it. I have got it published by a book and it has been launched just a few days ago. So if you are really struggling, you can always access my email and send me a mail, and we can always have a writing workshop for you. And I will leave actually my writing workshop program with your principal, so she can decide, or with your librarian and coordinator, so they can decide if you want a writing workshop in your school. And one final word, you must write for Author Awards. Submit your manuscript, submit your book for Author Awards. Author Awards is like an honor because it gives validation to your merit as a writer, to your creativity, and gives you an honor which really no other book award in this country does. So write and submit to Author Awards.
Well then, the deal is here. Keep writing, explore the writer within you. Lose yourself in your imaginative world. And truly, it has been quite a very, very interesting session. Can we have a round of applause for Ms. Basu for taking out time from her busy schedule to come in here and interact with us, with the young minds of today, and inspire us to, bring out the best versions of ourselves. I would also like to humbly thank Army Public School Principal, Ms. Neetu Kapoorji, and Ms. Debista ma'am, and the most gracious faculty for hosting this session here today. Can we have a round of applause for them as well? And last but not the least, I would like to thank all of you for taking our time, for giving us a full house here. Can we have a round of applause for each and every one of you sitting here today? And of course, do keep checking the Author Awards Facebook page and Instagram space for more, because we try to promote new writers, upcoming writers, young minds there. And you never know, any one of their stories might inspire you to try something different in life. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.